the man who cheated death and never spoke again. Have you ever wondered what's waiting for us on the other side? One man in the Bible actually found out and came back. In the ultimate miracle, Jesus raised his friend Lazarus from the grave. But here's the mystery. In the story that follows, the man who cheated death never says another word. Not one. What could he have possibly seen that would strike him silent for the rest of his life? The known story, a miracle in Bethany. To understand the silence, you first have to understand the miracle. The story, straight from the Gospel of John, is one of the most dramatic moments in the New Testament. It doesn't start with a show of power, but with a desperate plea. Lazarus of Bethany, a close friend of Jesus, was sick, deathly ill. His sisters, Mary and Martha, sent a message to Jesus, convinced he was the only one who could save their brother. But Jesus doesn't rush to his friend's side. In fact, he waits. The scripture says he intentionally stayed put for 2 more days. For Mary and Martha, watching their brother die, this must have felt like a complete betrayal. By the time Jesus finally started the journey to Bethany, it was too late. Lazarus was dead. When Jesus arrived, he walked into a scene of pure grief. Martha, always the practical one, ran out to meet him, her words a tangle of faith and heartbreak. "Lord," she said, "if you had been here, my brother would not have died." Jesus promised her, "Your brother will rise again." But Martha, like any of us would, thought he just meant the final resurrection at the end of time. The Gospel then tells us that upon seeing the family's agony, Jesus wept. It's a raw, human moment from the Son of God, a glimpse of divine love in the face of our suffering. But grief wasn't his final act. He asked them to take him to the tomb. It was a cave, sealed with a massive stone. Jesus gave a simple, terrifying order: "Take away the stone." Martha protested immediately. "But Lord," she warned, "by this time there is a bad odor, for he has been there 4 days." That 4-day detail is everything. In the Jewish understanding at the time, the soul was thought to linger near the body for 3 days. After that, decay set in and hope was gone. By waiting until the 4th day, Jesus wasn't just waking someone from a deep sleep, he was staging a head-on-head confrontation with death itself. With the stone rolled away, Jesus shouted with a voice of pure authority, "Lazarus, come out!" And then the impossible happened. The man, dead 4 days, walked out from the darkness of the tomb, still wrapped in his burial cloths. He was alive. It was a miracle that defied every law of nature and logic. The pivot to the mystery. This staggering event was proof of Jesus' power, causing many who witnessed it to believe in him. It was a living preview of Jesus' own resurrection, which was just around the corner. Jesus had given his friend the greatest gift you can imagine, life itself. And yet, in the pages that follow, Lazarus, the man who came back from the dead, is silent. The Bible shows him attending a dinner in Jesus' honor, but not a single word from him is ever recorded. The question that has echoed for centuries is, why? His resurrection was so threatening that the religious authorities didn't just plot to kill Jesus. They planned to kill Lazarus too. He was the living, breathing evidence they couldn't argue away. But what did Lazarus have to say about any of it? Nothing. His silence is almost as profound as the miracle itself. Let's explore the chilling theories behind the silence of Lazarus. The investigation exploring the theories. This leads us to the first possibility, the ineffable horror or the unspeakable glory. Is it possible Lazarus was silent simply because what he experienced was beyond human words? The afterlife, whether a place of torment or of paradise, is a reality so alien that our language, our concepts, even our senses just aren't equipped to describe it. Think of the Apostle Paul, who wrote in 2 Corinthians about being caught up to the 3rd heaven and hearing inexpressible things that no one is permitted to tell. If an apostle was forbidden or just unable to explain what he saw, couldn't the same be true for Lazarus? Perhaps he witnessed something so horrifying, a vision of damnation so bleak, that it scarred him permanently, making it impossible to ever truly rejoin the world. One later, non-biblical tradition claims that for the 30 years he lived after his return, Lazarus never smiled. The only exception was seeing a man steal a clay pot when he supposedly muttered, "The clay steals the clay." This paints a picture of a haunted man, burdened with a perspective that makes all our earthly worries seem meaningless. Or maybe he saw the exact opposite. What if he witnessed a glory so magnificent, a peace so complete, that being pulled back into his mortal body felt less like a rescue and more like an exile? How do you describe the music of heaven to ears that only know earthly songs? How do you explain the light of God to eyes that are used to the sun? Maybe his silence wasn't born from trauma, but from a quiet, unshakable reverence for something too holy to be put into words. But what if his silence wasn't his choice at all, but a divine order? This brings us to theory number 2, the sacred vow of silence. Just imagine the chaos if Lazarus had started talking. He would have become the most famous person in Judea overnight, a living hotline to the afterlife. People would have mobbed him, not to find faith in God, but to get a sneak peek, to satisfy a morbid curiosity. His story could have completely overshadowed the message Jesus came to share. The focus would have shifted from faith to facts, from trust to proof. God's plan, as laid out in the scriptures, has always been about faith. Jesus makes this exact point in a parable about another Lazarus, a poor beggar. In that story, a rich man in hell begs for Lazarus to be sent back from the dead to warn his brothers. The answer he gets is blunt. If they do not listen to Moses and the prophets, they will not be convinced even if someone rises from the dead. This points to a divine rule. Spectacular proof isn't the foundation of real belief, so maybe Lazarus was commanded to keep what he saw a secret. His silence was a form of protection, shielding the natural order of life and death, and guarding the fragile, essential nature of human faith. In this view, Lazarus's silence was an act of holy obedience. This idea of a divine purpose leads to our final and maybe most powerful theory, the living sermon. What if Lazarus's silence wasn't a lack of a message, but the message itself? What if his very existence was a sermon more powerful than any words he could ever speak? The Gospel of John tells us that because of Lazarus, many of the Jews were going over to Jesus and believing in him. That's what terrified the chief priests. It wasn't about what Lazarus might say, but who he was. Living, undeniable proof of Christ's authority over death. That's why they wanted him dead a second time. They could argue with words and teachings, but they couldn't argue with a man who was in a tomb for 4 days and was now eating dinner with them. In this light, his silence becomes his testimony. Every quiet breath he took was a shout proclaiming that Jesus is the resurrection and the life. Words would have just gotten in the way. Words can be twisted, debated, or dismissed. But his presence, his quiet, resurrected presence, was an irrefutable fact. He didn't need to describe the power of Jesus. He embodied it. He was a walking, breathing miracle, a living sermon whose message was so profound it required no sound at all. Conclusion. So why did the man who cheated death fall silent? Was he haunted by a vision too terrible, or humbled by one too beautiful for words? Was he bound by a sacred command to protect the nature of faith? Or was his silent presence the greatest testimony he could ever offer? The Bible never gives us the answer, leaving the silence of Lazarus as one of its great lingering mysteries. Later church traditions say he fled to Cyprus to escape persecution and served as a bishop there for another 30 years. A tomb found there in the 9th century is even inscribed, "Lazarus, 4 days dead, friend of Christ." But through all of it, the mystery of why the Bible records no words from him remains. And maybe that's the whole point. The silence of Lazarus forces us to look past the sensational and focus on the one who called him from the tomb in the first place. His silence pushes our attention away from the secrets of the next life and points it directly at the giver of all life. It leaves us with a question, not about what Lazarus saw, but about what we choose to believe. What do you think? Was his silence a result of trauma, a divine command, or was it a living testimony? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this dive into one of the Bible's deepest mysteries, be sure to subscribe for more.